manufacturers to track down the source of high-quality copies of their merchandise, which had been flooding the market from somewhere in the Greater Manchester area. Surprise, surprise, I'd ended up with the sticky end while Bill sat in the office moodily staring into his computer screens. Matters had come to a head when Garnett's, the city's biggest independent jewellers, had been broken into. The thieves had ignored the safe and the alarm display cases, and had simply stolen the contents of a cupboard in the manager's office. What they had walked away with were the green leather wallets that are presented free to purchasers of genuine Rolex watches, the luxury market's equivalent of a free plastic daffodil with every packet of soap powder. They'd also taken the credit card wallets that Gucci give to their customers, as well as dozens of empty boxes for Cartier and Raymond Vale watches. This theft told the manufacturers that the counterfeit business, known in the trade as Schneids, was moving up a gear. Till now, the villains had been content to sell their wares as copies via a complicated network of small traders. While that had infuriated the companies, it hadn't kept them awake at night, because the sort of people who part with £40 in a pub or at a market stall for a fake Rolex aren't the sort who've got a few grand tucked away in their back pockets for the real thing. But now it looked as if the Schneid merchants were planning to pass their clever copies off as the genuine article. Not only might that take business away from straight outlets, it could also affect the luxury watchmaker's reputation for quality. Suddenly, it was worth spending money to knock the racket on the head. Mortenson and Brannigan might not be up there in the top 10 of Britain's major private investigation companies, but we'd landed this job for two good reasons. Although our main area of work is in computer fraud and security systems, we were the first people who sprang to Garnett's minds, since Bill had designed their computerized security system, and they had ignored his suggestion that the cupboard in question be linked in to the overall system. After all, they'd argued, there was nothing in there worth stealing. The second reason was that we were one of the few firms of specialist private investigators operating out of Manchester. We knew the territory. When we took the job on, we anticipated clearing it up in a matter of days. What we hadn't grasped was the scale of the operation. Getting to grips with it had worn me into the ground. However, in the last couple of days, I'd started to feel that warm glow of excitement in the pit of my stomach that always tells me I'm getting close. I had found the factory where the Schneid watches were being produced. I knew the names of the two men who were wholesaling the merchandise and who their main middlemen were. All I had to do was establish the pattern of their movements, and then we could hand over to our clients. I suspected that sometime in the next couple of weeks, the men I had been following would be on the receiving end of a very unwelcome visit from the cops and trading standards officials, which would ultimately mean a substantial reward for Mortenson and Brannigan, on top of our already substantial fee. Because it was all going so well, I had promised myself a well-deserved and much-needed early night after I had followed Jack Billy Smart, my No.1 suspect, back to his gothic 3-story house in a quiet, tree-lined suburban street that evening at 6. He'd walked in with a couple of bottles of Moët and an armful of videos from the shop round the corner, and I figured he was all set for a kiss and a cuddle in front of the television with his girlfriend. Come to that, I could have kissed him myself. Now I could go home, have a quick shower, send a cab out for a takeaway from nearby Chinatown, and watch the soaps. Then I'd have a face pack and luxuriate in a long, slow bath and beauty routine. It's not that I'm obsessive about personal hygiene, by the way, just that I've always felt that showers are for getting rid of the dirt, while baths are for serious pleasures like reading the adventure game reviews in computer magazines and fantasizing about the computer I'll upgrade to when Mortenson and Brannigan's ship comes in. With luck, Richard would be out on the town, so I could perform my ablutions in total peace, accompanied only by a long, cool drink. Well, I'd been right about one thing at least. Richard was certainly going out on the town. What I hadn't bargained for was being there with him. So much for my plans. I knew I was no match for Richard tonight. I was just too tired to win the argument. Besides, deep down, I knew I didn't have a